We're all taught that the Great Pyramids of Egypt represent the dawn of monumental architecture. For thousands of years, they were seen as the absolute pinnacle of ancient human achievement. But what if the timeline we've all been given is wrong? What if, thousands of years before the first stone was even laid at Giza, an even larger metropolis existed, a city with its own pyramids and grand avenues, now completely lost to us, hidden under more than 2,000 feet of water? In 2001, a sonar survey off the coast of Cuba stumbled upon something impossible: the clear, geometric patterns of a sunken city. This one discovery could either rewrite history as we know it, or it might just be one of the most elaborate tricks nature has ever played. The fierce debate that followed pits advanced technology against an ancient mystery, and tonight we're diving into the heart of it. The story starts in 2001, deep in the waters off the western tip of Cuba. A team of Canadian engineers, Paulina Zalitsky and her husband Paul Weinsweig, were running a company called Advanced Digital Communications. They'd been hired by the Cuban government for a pretty routine job: survey the seabed for colonial-era Spanish shipwrecks, the kind that might be filled with treasure. Using advanced side-scan sonar, they were methodically mapping the ocean floor off the Guanahacoibes Peninsula. But what their equipment picked up was far more startling than gold or galleons. At a depth between 600 and 750 meters, that's nearly 2,500 feet down, their sonar began painting a picture that just didn't make sense. On the otherwise empty plains of the deep sea, a series of stunningly symmetrical and geometric structures began to emerge. The images showed what looked for all the world like roads, large circular shapes, and massive silhouettes that appeared to be pyramids. Zalitsky later described it as a wonderful structure which looks like it could have been a large urban center. Completely baffled, they went back to the site, this time with a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, to get a closer look. The video it sent back, though hazy in the crushing darkness, seemed to confirm their wildest suspicions. It captured images of enormous, smooth blocks of stone, some of which looked like hewn granite, stacked in what appeared to be a purposeful design. When the discovery was announced, the world of archaeology held its breath. If these structures were man-made, their estimated age of over 6,000 years would make them older than Egypt's pyramids, completely upending our understanding of ancient civilization in the Americas. As you can imagine, the news sparked a media frenzy with headlines about a lost city of the Caribbean, often drawing parallels to the fabled Atlantis. But almost as quickly, the scientific community hit the brakes hard. The biggest challenge wasn't just what the structures were, but where they were. The lead scientist on the expedition, a respected Cuban marine geologist named Manuel Iturralde Vinant, became the voice of caution. While he admitted the structures were extremely peculiar and that he had a hard time explaining them geologically, he pointed out one massive problem. For a city to be nearly 2,500 feet underwater, it would have had to sink there. Based on what we know about geology and sea level rise, Iturralde Vinant estimated it would have taken 50,000 years for that land to subside to its current depth. And that's the paradox. 50,000 years ago, according to all established records, humans simply didn't have the ability to build complex urban centers. As one expert from Florida State University put it, finding a city from that period would be real advanced for anything we would see in the New World for that time frame. Iturralde Vinant also argued that the kind of violent geological event needed to sink a city that, deep like a catastrophic earthquake, wouldn't leave an trees, organized city intact. It would be a jumble of debris, not the neat geometric layout the sonar scans suggested. The scientific consensus began to form. This couldn't be a city, because if it was, our entire understanding of human prehistory would have to be wrong. Nature, many argued, must be playing tricks on our eyes. This is where the debate gets really compelling. While the scientific arguments against the city are powerful, the visual evidence is tough to just brush aside. The discoverers, Zalitsky and Weinzweig, countered the skepticism with a simple question. If it's all just a trick of nature, how do you explain these perfectly geometric shapes? The sonar images weren't just a few random angles. They revealed what looked like an organized complex spreading over 2 square kilometers. The patterns showed linear features that looked like corridors and structures that appeared cubic, pyramidal, and circular. One of the most striking images, which even Iturald Vinant admitted was difficult to explain by natural causes, showed a series of parallel lines and right angles that looked uncannily like walls and passages. The ROV footage added another layer of mystery. It showed large blocks, some measuring 8 by 10 feet, that looked like polished granite. Zalitsky noted that granite isn't native to that part of the Cuban coast, which is mostly limestone. This suggested the stone might have been brought there, a classic sign of human construction. Zalitsky and her team didn't claim it was Atlantis. They proposed a more local theory, that these were the ruins of a culture that lived on a land bridge connecting Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula to Cuba. This civilization, they argued, wasn't submerged by slow sea level rise, but by a sudden, catastrophic tectonic event. This theory was their attempt to reconcile the impossible depth with a more recent timeline, one where humans were capable builders. The evidence, they insisted, was in the stones themselves. The heart of the Cuban underwater mystery is a classic scientific showdown: human design versus natural processes. The lost civilization theory rests almost entirely on those sonar scans. Proponents argue that nature, while it can create geometric shapes, rarely produces them with such consistency and organization over a huge area. They see pyramids, roads, and buildings, all the components of a planned city. The ROV footage of massive smooth blocks seems to back this up, suggesting quarrying and masonry, not random erosion. On the other side stands the natural formation theory, which is the dominant view in the scientific community. Geologists argue that the ocean floor is full of bizarre shapes created over millions of years. Formations like the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland show how cooling lava can create stunningly regular, hexagonal columns that look completely artificial. Skeptics believe the Cuban formations could be similar megamorphisms or carbonate structures. They suggest that what the sonar picked up as buildings could just be fractures, faults, and sedimentary layers. But their trump card is always the depth. The 50,000-year timeline required for that land to sink naturally places the site's origin long before any known human civilization could have built it. As one expert bluntly put it, what looks human is not necessarily human. Without a physical sample, a piece of drilled granite, or a confirmed artifact, the city remains pure speculation. The Cuban site doesn't exist in a vacuum. The debate around it echoes mysteries from other underwater locations. Perhaps the most famous parallel is the Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan. Discovered in the 1980s, it's a massive terraced stone structure. Like the Cuban site, it sparked a fierce debate. Some researchers claim it's a 5,000-year-old man-made monolith, while most geologists argue it's a natural formation of sandstone shaped by ocean currents. The key difference? Yonaguni is in only about 10 to 20 meters of water, making it far more plausible that it was once above sea level. Then there's Pavlopetri, off the coast of Greece. This isn't a mystery, it's a fact. Submerged in just 3 to 4 meters of water, Pavlopetri is a confirmed Bronze Age city with streets, buildings, and tombs dating back to around 3000 BCE. It's one of the oldest submerged cities ever found, and proves that entire towns could be lost to the waves. And finally, there's Port Royal in Jamaica, once called the wickedest city on earth. It was plunged into the sea by a massive earthquake in 1692. Its buildings now lie just 40 feet underwater, a modern and definitive example of a city sinking in a catastrophe. These examples put the Cuban discovery in perspective. Unlike Pavlo-Petri and Port Royal, it has never been physically verified. And unlike Yonaguni, its extreme depth makes a man-made origin almost impossible to square with the known timeline of human history. Whenever a potential underwater city is found, one name inevitably comes up: Atlantis. The Cuban discovery was no different. The media immediately began asking if Plato's lost civilization had been found. However, even the discoverers were wary of making that leap. Polina Zalitsky stated clearly, "What we have found is more likely remnants of a local culture." Her theory pointed to legends from the Maya and native Yucatecos of Cuba, which speak of an ancestral island that vanished beneath the waves, grounding the discovery in a regional story, not a Greek myth. Skeptics are quick to dismiss any link to Atlantis. First, the depth is all wrong. Plato described Atlantis sinking into a shallow, muddy sea, not a 2,500-foot abyss. Second, the timeline is off. Plato's story places the destruction of Atlantis around 11,500 years ago, a date that doesn't fit with either the 6,000-year-old estimate from the discoverers or the 50,000-year geological model. Without any matching artifacts, the Atlantis connection remains pure speculation. So, if this discovery is so potentially monumental, why haven't we heard more about it? Why hasn't a major, conclusive expedition followed up in over 2 decades? The story of the Cuban underwater city faded not because it was disproven, but because the investigation just stalled. Several factors are to blame. First, the enormous cost and technical challenge of a deep-sea archaeological mission are staggering. Exploring a site at that depth requires specialized submersibles capable of drilling into what might be granite, a hugely expensive operation. Second, there were political and financial hurdles. After the initial buzz, the funding for a full-scale expedition never came through. As the years passed without new data, the story faded from the headlines and slipped into the realm of internet mystery. Today, it's a cold case. The sonar images are just as tantalizing as they were in 2001, but they remain just that, images. Without physical samples, core drills, or more detailed mapping, the true nature of the structures off the coast of Cuba remains unproven. And so the mystery remains, suspended between two seemingly impossible conclusions. On one hand, we have what appears to be a massive complex of geometric structures, something geologists admit is hard to explain by natural processes alone. On the other, we have a location so deep that for it to be a city, it would have to be 50,000 years old, rewriting everything we think we know about the dawn of civilization. It's a place that, according to our current rulebook, simply shouldn't exist. Is it the last remnant of an unknown chapter of human history, lost to the abyss? Or is it just an incredible geological illusion, a grand trick of stone and water that our pattern-seeking brains have mistaken for a city? The truth remains locked away, 2,500 feet beneath the waves, waiting for the day when technology and ambition can finally bring it to light. What do you think is down there off the coast of Cuba? A lost city or a geological marvel? Drop your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoy diving into the world's greatest mysteries, make sure to like and subscribe for more explorations into the unknown.